In this video, I want to look at the watch windows in Visual Studio. I'll be using this app, Example App, and I'll be working with some of the classes in here. This book class, this bookstore class, and the user interface components in this main window.xaml file. If you look at the UI, you'll see there's two buttons and a calendar control. Keep that in mind as I start debugging the application. I'll choose a date from the calendar, and then I'll click on this Watch Windows button. Now I've hit my breakpoint, and I can see all my code and my variables. In some of the other videos in this chapter, I've talked about the data tip. You hover your mouse over a variable, and you get a data tip. Data tips are great, they're quick, they're easy to work with, but there are times when you are debugging when you want to keep the values visible at all times, stuck to the side of the window, or docked to the side of the window. So that's the purpose of the watch window. I can take this variable, this greeting variable, right-click on it, and choose Add Watch. It added a new line down here to my Watch 1 window. Another way of adding a variable is to double-click on it and drag it to the watch window. And the final way is to type the variable name. I have a calendar called Main Calendar, so I can choose that from this list. I think it's nice that Visual Studio gives me the same IntelliSense I get in my code editor window inside my watch window. So I'll pick this Main Calendar and then press enter. What do you get in the watch window? Let's look. In the first column is the name of the variable or the name of the control. In the second column is the value that's currently stored in there. It tells me as the developer what the data type is of that variable. So I can see this first variable is a string. The second variable is an instance of my book class. The third one's a double. The fourth one is Microsoft's .NET type, the system.datetime. And this last one is an instance of the calendar control. Now, when you're working with complex types, like my book class here, you can see the properties of the variable inside the watch window. I'll look at peak definition, which will show me the information about how my class is declared. So I can see my book class has title, author, and price properties. And if I click on this little triangle here, I'll see those same properties in the watch window. So I see the author's name is Walt Richer, and I can see the value, and I can see the data type of that and my other properties here. This also works for the current date. I can see the properties of the date time type, and I can see the properties of this main calendar control. I'll stop debugging for a second, and I'll close this solution. Now we're going to put on the hat of a developer who's gone on vacation for a couple of days, comes back, and they're ready to start debugging their application again. They open up the project, start debugging, pick a date, and then click the Watch Windows button. And this is what I want you to see. See in the watch window? It remembered that the last time I was debugging inside this project, I had these watch variables loaded, and it reloads them. You can get a lot of variables in this watch window. I'm not sure what the limit is. If you need more than you can fit in this, you can add a second watch window. More likely reason to add a second watch window is because you'd like to organize your watch variables. So let me show you how to do that. You need to be in a debug session to make this happen. Then go to Windows, and then go to Watch, and then pick one of these other three watch windows. I'll choose watch number 2. It looks exactly the same as watch number 1. They're right next to each other down here, and you add variables the same way. Now I'll stop running, and I'll use the code inside this second button here, this More Watch Windows button click procedure. So I'll start it again, click on this second button, and then drag this book variable down here. It works exactly the same as the other watch window. In fact, if I go over to this other watch window, you'll see some interesting things over here. I'll see that greeting, markup percent, and current date have red icons by them. Sometimes they'll be grayed out, depends on where you are in your debugging session. But that's how Visual Studio tells you that these are not in scope at the moment. I'm debugging inside one method. These variables were set up in the watch window when I was inside another method. But it so happens that the book variable is the same across both methods, so I can still see the contents of this book class in either watch window. As you've seen, the watch window works really well for variables. It also works for properties of an object. Like I can type in book.author and show just a single property on that object. And this also works if you have static classes or static methods in classes. You can call those. Let me show you what I mean. In this bookstore class, I have a property called daily book sales, which returns the number of books we sold today. And I also have a method that does the same thing called get daily book sales. They both are identical, just one's a property and one's a method. The way I've set this up is I've got a fictitious book sale amount, and I have a timer running in the background that occasionally updates the daily book sale. Let's see, I need to switch back to my code where I'm at the breakpoint. Now I'll add that property from my bookstore class. And I'll also add the call to that method. That seems to work. It shows me the name of the item. In this case, it's the property name and the method name. It shows the current value that Visual Studio got when it called those methods in that property. And it shows me the data type that's being returned from those items. But here's where it differs in the watch window. Let's say that I've been editing my code for a few minutes, and I've decided that I want to rerun one of the lines of code in this method. So I drag my yellow arrow up here, and then I press the Step Into button or press F11. Now here's what I want you to see. In the watch window, the property value changed, and Visual Studio tells me that it changed by making it in red. This is how it lets you know what the most recent changes are in the watch window, the locals window, and the autos window. It didn't update the value coming from the get daily book sales, however. Why is that? Here's the idea that Microsoft has. They don't know what that call to the method is going to do. And it could be that you've written that method in some way that it's going to have some side effects in your code. So they don't want to invoke it without your permission. On the other hand, properties usually don't have side effects. So they made the decision to go ahead and return that data. But they let you know that the data is possibly changed by putting this icon here, this circular arrow. And there's a tooltip that pops up when I hover over that that says the value of this expression may be incorrect. And they're telling me why they didn't reevaluate it, because it causes side effects. Say, I want to get that data. I can click on this button, and Visual Studio will go out and recall that method and show the data. One last demo before I'm done. You can remove items from the watch window by right-clicking on it and choosing Delete Watch. Or what I usually do is just select the item and press the Delete key on my keyboard.